Hopefully my internet signal doesn't drop off on us. I live out in the country, and half the time it's not great.
No, I feel you in the same way.
Okay. Looks like it's started.
Internet signal.
Okay, there we go. Let's see if I can find my chat function. Hey, everybody, I'm JJ. You're watching Reality Survival. And today we're going to be talking with Bill Stoker from Stokermatic. And he has written a new book. It's called the SHTF Field Manual. And we'll talk a little bit about that, as well as just kind of, other things. All right, I'll get this technology figured out one of these days. On this computer, it doesn't ever show me the chat window, so I try to find that. I'll try to find it later. Okay, guys, so just want to remind you, tonight's going to be the last night to get in on the giveaway on Substack. This is a Faraday dry bag, and it'll take a 15-inch laptop this is from Go Dark Bags, to protect your laptop or whatever, any kind of a tablet or something like that. If there was an EMP, this is a LED flashlight from Sofrin. How many? 3,100 lumens. So we'll be giving that away. And then also a backpack insert. This is a 3A plus, real thin, nice and flexible. You can put this in your kid's backpack, if we're going to school, and the world we live in nowadays. This is from nationalbodyarmor.com. And we've got a discount code over there for you guys, 25% if you use the Reality Survival discount code. So get on over to Substack. It's realitysurvival.substack.com. Sign up and you can get in on that giveaway. Okay, enough of that. Bill, how you doing, man?
Hey, I'm doing great, JJ. Appreciate you having me on.
Yeah, you bet, man. Absolutely. I think, honestly, your channel is one of my favorite new channels that I just came across probably, I don't know, maybe a couple of months ago or something like that. And what I like about your channel is you get out there in the field and you actually go do the things. You know what I mean? You're out there in the field and you take your dog out there, and you guys spend a lot of time in the woods. You show really good examples of field craft and all that kind of stuff. And I think it's a great channel. One of these days when I retire, I would love to be able to go out and do more of that kind of thing. And I think it's if you guys haven't subscribed to his channel, you definitely should. It's a really good channel. So it's called Stokermatic, and we'll have it linked, down below as well. So Bill, tell me a little bit about this book. What prompted writing the SHTF Field Manual?
Oh, well, I creating content on YouTube, and then reading and responding to people leaving comments and having some really good conversations with folks. I really began to realize more and more that a lot of the language that we use in the military isn't some of it is too upper echelon, and it's speak that nobody uses except in at brigade echelons or higher. And then there's other language that, as it relates to the individual and team level, that doesn't really connect the two together. And so I had this idea of if I could try to find a way to make these two mesh and then put them into scenarios as it relates to general preparedness and as it relates to SHTF, then maybe it may cause some good conversations. Maybe it will help some folks resonate, because I have a lot of people in my community group here that are hungry to figure out how to connect what they want to do, whether it's self-defense or convoy operations or things of this nature. But they can go and you can find all the FMs that you want, but how do you actually turn that into something that you can practically and physically put into motion? So that's kind of what was the driving factor for writing the book.
Very cool. I noticed that what it seemed like to me, and I haven't finished all of it, but I've gotten through a good portion of it. And what it seems like to me is it does a really, it's almost kind of like the Ranger handbook, but for civilians. Like, you know, you took the key parts of the important parts of, like, what are the things that people could actually use if there was a situation, and, you know, that kind of thing. And I thought that was really good, and it has a little bit more of a civilian flair, like you're saying, than some of the highly technical stuff. So that is pretty cool. So tell us a little bit about your background. What is the, you know, you wrote this book and everything like that. What makes you an expert in all this kind of stuff?
Well, I'm still figuring out that piece, but in 1995 BC, before cell phones, enlisted in the United States Marine Corps and spent 8 years serving with them, and the majority of them at that time, still got the crud from California. I spent with the First Fleet Anti-Terrorism Security Team Company out of Norfolk, and a lot of schools, a lot of training, operational deployment with them. Really good times, really good dudes that we were working with. Had a 8-year break where I was Mr. Stoker again. And then in 2010, came back into service, Army that time around. Spent majority of that time in leadership positions, from fire team leader to first sergeant. A little bit of operations, but most of it was on the line, leading soldiers. And I think what that excuse me, what that did for me was it helped me figure out ways to connect with people in ways that to put handles on things, so somebody could pick it up and go run with it. And I think that the vast majority of service members, they just want to go do their job, whatever their MOS is. And too many times leaders have a habit of getting themselves in the way of something. And so many of them want to do fieldcraft stuff, but things get lost in translation and people become disgruntled. And I think it's the same thing on the civilian side. Like, people want to know what to do if X, Y, or Z happens. And there's so much noise that's out there, and there's not enough, quality people who can find a way to just explain things in such a way that I get that now. I understand now. I have something that I can go and do and apply to my own life. So just a wide variety of experience, and certainly no expert in any particular thing or whatnot. But I've been really fortunate to have served in the positions and with the units that I have to put me where I am at today.
You care if I run down the list of chapters in your table of contents here?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
So we've got the 8 rules of fieldcraft, troop leading procedures, mission and operational variables, operations orders, principles of patrolling, route planning, noise, light, and litter discipline, rally points, perimeter security, hunting man, evasion principles, and immediate action drills. I thought those were all really good, and especially in the back here, I was just looking at the golden rules for evasion. I thought those were all really really good. You can tell you spent a lot of time in exercises and maybe real world, but where you're looking at academically, like, okay, this is what you got to be focused on and thinking about, when you're doing these things. Evasion was my favorite portion to teach at survival school, at the SEER school, and you can tell that you have a lot of experience with it. So it was really well written, and you did a good job with that. I thought it was pretty cool.
I appreciate it.
Yeah, you bet, man. So have you had any challenging experiences with regard to SEER training that you've gone through or that you've been a part of, or anything like that you think people might find interesting?
Like institutional training?
Yeah, I mean, whatever. I mean, or lessons, just things you've learned, or, I mean,
I think one of the things that we take for granted is the amount of mental taxation that that scenario specifically and just operating in a contested environment does to you. The physical aspect, I think we get, because a lot of us, we go to the gym or we do some kind of workout, we go for a walk, we take a hike, go to the dogs, and we know that we can or can't wear 35, 45, 65, 85 pounds
Yeah.
for any particular time or whatever condition that we're in. But just that mental aspect of consistently keeping your head on a swivel and being in a yellow and having, really positive situational awareness, you can only stay in that state for so long, and we see it on deployments, right? The first couple of weeks, when your boots are on the ground, man, you are so heightened that if somebody drops a trash can, you're ducking for cover, and
Yeah.
it's kind of state that people go into. And then you have the first, I'm going to roll out of the fob, and I'm going to finally do my first convoy operation or do my first dismounted patrol. And it is so taxing and wearing. And by the time you get to the end of that deployment, you're like, dude, I don't give a shit anymore. Like,
Right.
whatever, the alarms are going off and I'm staying
Yeah.
in the back. Like, I don't even care
Yeah.
anymore. And that's where you see people get hurt and get injured and get killed because they become too complacent. But at the same time, you can't operate and sustain operations. It's very challenging to do that, and to have that mental awareness and that vigilance. And I think, quite frankly, that's why so many service members suffer from a hyper state of vigilance,
Yeah.
when we get out, and it's taxing. So finding ways to mitigate and control that is super important, because you have to maintain that awareness, but at the same time, you have to have some kind of place where you can let that go a little bit. And even as it relates to evasion, whether you get to a place and you can rest overnight or rest during the day, and you just kind of take a little bit of that of that stress off of you, is super important.
Absolutely.
That way you can continue to know where you're at, and to think about where you're at, and you can continue to plan a route so that you can stay on the route and then recognize the objective and get back to a safe spot. So just stuff I think about.
Yeah, no, I think that's great. And I think, that probably also dovetails into some civilian aspects where a lot of people talk about, bugging out, getting out on their own. And, the common kind of perception is I'm going to take my backpack and I'm going to head to the woods and I'm never going to see anybody again. And, you'll be out on your own kind of thing. But that's tough living, man. It ain't super easy. You know what I'm saying?
Oh, it's not. We were just talking here in the county that we're at, which is 25,000 people in Union County, North Georgia, and we really have just one town in the county, and we have we have one Walmart and one grocery store. Each one of those receives 8 to 12 truckloads of produce each and every single week to sustain 25,000 people. And so we were just talking, what would it be like if that transportation system got jacked up? Like how much can the county sustain itself? And the short answer to that test is about 4 or 5 days.
Right.
If everything stopped, like there's not enough cattle in the county to feed people. There's not enough deer, to feed, or other wildlife to feed folks beyond that point in time. So definitely, when you think about getting off and bugging out, it sounds good. Go watch Alone. Like these guys,
Right.
you don't make it.
Yeah.
You gotta have better planning involved for sure.
You hit about 30 days and it starts to really, really get difficult mentally.
Okay. Yeah.
I mean, it's even at the 3 week point, we were out 3 weeks and in my first phase of training, and I wasn't alone the whole time. We had people, but even at the 3 week point being out there, I was like, yeah, I'm ready to get back to civilization, like this ain't a lot of fun. Being alone would be, it would be 20 times harder, I think. Like you said, you get in that hyper state of vigilance, and every snap, twig that you hear out in the woods and all that kind of stuff. I mean, it just grates away at you in ways that you really, you can't quite fully comprehend until you've been out there a few nights and you spent some time alone in the woods, and what it's like and stuff. So what are your thoughts on groups, and as far as how do people get to know people, and should you join a mag or a prepper group, or what are your thoughts on that topic?
I think in general, having you and your family, right? That's that first group that should be in focus. And then you have all of your extended family, especially if you happen to live in the same area. You already have some levels of trust. Most families do, anyways.
Right.
So having some conversations about the what ifs and those contingencies that we all plan for. Getting to know your neighbors. Going to knock on some doors is not an easy thing to do because it requires some social skills and some intestinal fortitude to go say, "Hey, my name's Bill. How you doing? You want to have some supper?" And then get to talk story with the people that live in your immediate area, because whether or not you end up becoming close knit with these people or not, you still need to know who's around you,
Right.
whether they're a threat or whether they're an asset. And then one of the things that I did, because I'm still working through this, having just moved here into the area, one of the first things I did was I drove around to all the gun shops in town just to talk story with folks. Some of them have been here for a long time in the county, and some of them are transplants. So getting to hear and talk to and hear their stories about things that they've seen that have changed here in the area, and things that they look forward to. And then I went and talked to found myself a really good mechanic who's been here for a long time. It's good to know people with specialized skills like that, especially if you need something. I went and talked to some. I can't remember the official name for a beekeeper, whatever they have. They have weird names.
Oh,
but
yeah.
I went and talked to all kinds of folks, and just to find the people who have different niches as it relates to just general preparedness and survival, from least likely to most likely. Construction guys, sewage guys, plumbing guys, HVAC guys, all the guys that are out working with their hands on the daily, that a lot of times we take for granted, especially in the military. It's stuff that we take for granted because whether you live on post and you can just call somebody, and the guys on the garrison are going to come take care of it, or if you're just constantly moving so much every 3 to 4 years, that there's only so many actual life skills that you can put into application just because of that constant state of movement. And then I was fortunate. One of the guys, the brother of the guy that I work for, is in a close community group. There's about 10 of us in the core group, and then there's a little bit larger circles outside of that, but we're all just focused on living out our life with honor and integrity, and finding ways to incarnate who we are as a people, as well as being honest and upfront as far as the state of the world that we live in. And we've had some hard conversations, and it's some, I think that some people refuse to have, like, everybody wants to think, well, if the end of the world happens, then we're all going to join together and go somewhere. Well, I brought this up with these guys. I was like, hey, well, you, Bob, you got, 6 months of food stored up at your house, and 30,000 rounds of ammunition or whatever it is. And everybody is all like this. I said, what is that point going to look like when you pick up and leave with or without your stuff?
How bad does it got to get?
Right. And is it already too late by the time it gets there to make those decisions? And it's so we're looking forward to trying to plan and talk and work through some of that stuff, and communication is a big one. We're trying to set up a good radio net here to keep everybody involved. But having, again, the small circle of, you and your family, and it just kind of keeps getting bigger and bigger. And some of these circles may never overlap with one another, and that's a good thing, to have some diversity in your community, because if something breaks here, well, that's okay. I have everybody over here. So good to reach out and get to know people. And there's a lot of weirdos out there, as it relates to I'll use that nasty word, militia.
Mhm. Well, and I think you have to be extremely careful with pre-existing groups,
Yeah.
especially groups that have high internet presence.
Yeah.
I don't recommend getting involved with any of those groups, because I can guarantee you that everybody that you talk to has been talked to by some three-letter agency at some point or another. And it just isn't worth it. I think it makes way more sense personally to, like you're talking about, get to know the people in your area. Think about, like I've had conversations with some of my neighbors. Where would we, because to me, kind of like what you were referring to, it's a lot easier to stay and control one piece of ground you're familiar with than it is to pick up and try to move to another place. What would we want to do as far as controlling roads and access and allowing people in, and those kinds of things? Like that to me seems way more practical than trying to pick up and put a backpack on my wife and take her out into the woods when she's never been out in the woods before. Like that ain't gonna that's gonna be a ball of stress like nobody's business. You know what I mean? Like that ain't gonna happen very long. So and it would have to be a really extreme situation, but if we could keep people from getting into the neighborhood, there's only a couple ways in, a couple of roadblocks, and that's gonna eliminate 99% of the problems. It's a lot easier to man a couple of roadblocks than it is to go out and try to live out in the woods or whatever. So you were talking about getting to know people. Have you seen these little playing cards called little conflicted playing cards? It's kind of interesting. They have little different scenarios on there, and then it's just like a little points game and all that kind of stuff. And it's a pretty good way to get to know people. Like if you invite them over to the house, and then you can play this just as a card game, just to get to sit around and get to know them. And it asks different stuff, different survival scenario questions and all that kind of thing. And so we've done that before with some fairly new friends, and it was kind of enlightening. And I was like, okay, so you guys are not going to be members of people who are going to come over. But it's kind of fun. So you mentioned something about state of the world earlier. What do you think about the state of the world right now? How is everything? Just what's your perspective on where we're at in the world?
Yeah, before I tell you that, I want to tell you, in '96, I had an inspection, and our company gunny came out, and he was just talking about the old Corps, and belittling everybody and just being that hard ass. He was a great gunnery sergeant. I was on the phone with my dad, and talking to him about the inspection. He's like, son, let me tell you something. He's a boot to me. To him, I'm old Corps. And when I was in, my seniors were talking about the old Corps of the Korean War era, and when they were in, they were talking about the old Corps of Vietnam. And then when they were in there, when your grandfather was in World War II, his salt dogs were talking about the old Corps. Everybody's always talking about the old Corps.
Sure.
And I say that to say that it's undeniable that something is different now than the way that it was. But at the same time, I always try to look at everything through a critical lens, regardless of the conversation I'm having with. I could have a conversation with, a far leftist, and have an easy critical conversation with them. But I can also have a very critical conversation with, a staunch constitutionalist, even though that can be a little bit more challenging, because I always want to have open and honest conversations, because I think that's the only way to actually grow. But I say that to say that it's undeniable that things are different now than they've ever been before. Whether you're talking about the military, whether you're talking about the civilian world, and the state of affairs, things seem to be extremely fragile. And I mean, more and more, this growing state of being on life support that society is at, which truthfully, I think probably goes back to, well, some portions of civilization have always been on life support. Anytime you have an urban structure where people give up being food producers in order to be tradesmen of some other kind, now you're relying on somebody else to give you security, to give you food, whatever it is. People who live in rural communities have historically not had that same issue, but all the city areas, all those built up areas have all had the same issue. Well, in the U.S. specifically, going back, post World War II, anyways, it was a chicken in every pot and a car in every garage, and you saw the drastic change and driving up of urbanization in the United States. And there's a lot of other societal and economic factors that have increased over time. And then you get into the 80s, and we really start to balloon our budget. God love Ronald Reagan, but he exploded our spending.
Yeah.
Not saying it wasn't without due cause, but things haven't slowed down since then. So whether the big writing on the wall is a crazy economic collapse, like there's no way on an individual level, if an individual was at the same state of deficit spending and that the federal government is at, like you'd have to file for bankruptcy. Like the bank would come knocking on your door.
Yeah.
Whether again, thinking about the life support that every urban area, and it's not just urban areas, like everybody has some sort of life support system as it relates to food. Nobody can grow and sustain enough food for a large community, and it's pretty devastating. The housing market is just absolutely ridiculous, and there's no telling what the trigger point is going to be, whether it's another summer of love, right? Whether
I think we can guarantee that.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Whether you're thinking about, an external threat, because there's plenty of them out there. If you look at all of the unknowns that have come across the borders, like there's just, even if, that's how I look at conspiracies, even if only a small fraction of the craziest conspiracy is true, that should be enough to scare the shit out of you.
Sure.
It's the same thing with people coming over the border. Like I'm not one to think that every single person who's crossing illegally has ill intention in their heart.
Right.
But all it takes is just a few. And, you can imagine if we've seen in the U.S. some of the terrorist activities that we've seen, especially like before the global war on terror, like down in Colombia, hostage taking by the FARC was at an all-time high, attacking the power infrastructure because people were down there, and quite honestly, they're kind of taking advantage of their environment down there, but with the power companies and everybody else. But you had a lot of specific terrorist activity happening. Same thing over in Europe. Just would blow your mind if that was continuing to happen now. But if it happened here, could be, at a mall, a sporting event, extremely.
Yeah. Could you imagine if let's say there were, I don't know, 25 guys came across the border. Me and some buddies of mine talked about this before, and you had five-man teams spread out across the United States,
Right.
and they all went to 5 different Friday night football games, spread out all over the place.
Yeah, exactly.
And just and let loose, killing who knows how many different people. What the reaction would be would I mean, that attack would be terrible and it would be bad in and of itself, but the reaction to it and the
Right.
government overreaction and everything would just, it would blow people away.
Yeah.
I mean, there's definitely things like that could happen that would shut down our society. I mean, the loss of freedom would be catastrophic.
Yeah. Oh, and it's not implausible to think that there would be that overreaction. You can't even walk into an airport anymore without getting your body frisked. Like I remember the whole family going through
Yeah.
to the gate, and only one person was flying, and everybody's there to say hello or to pick somebody up. So it's crazy the things that we give up. Sometimes way too easy, and once you give something up, like it's extremely hard to get it back.
Yeah. Well, I don't know that we ever do. I mean, at least there's not much precedent in government ever, releasing their authorities once they've gotten them. That's not typical anyway.
So true.
Yeah, yeah. So, what's your thoughts on what this next election season is going to look like? Any ideas? I mean, obviously, you're not prophetic or anything like that, but you talked about the summer of love. Do you think that there will be, um, more of that, and if so, what might that look like?
I think I think the worst thing that could happen would be a repeat of the 2016 election. If it's the same two people running, like no matter who
2020
wins.
or
Yeah,
20, yeah,
yeah,
2020.
yeah, exactly. 2020. That's what I said. Um, if those same two people running, like no matter who wins, everybody's going to lose because that losing party is going to absolutely lose their mind, and get absolutely ridiculous. I do think, um, by all appearances, I don't think the DNC wants Biden to run, um, but I think Biden wants to run again. So I think there's probably going to be some friction there between him and the DNC.
Or at least Jill does.
Yeah, right. Uh,
Biden's not sure if he's coming or going, I don't think.
um, but I also don't think that the DNC certainly doesn't want Kamala. Um, she's a huge liability for him. And I think that they think that they want Newsom, right? And he's going all the way for months. He went to the White House when the president was gone,
Yeah.
and touring around with his coat over his shoulder and hosting dignitaries and debating DeSantis and everything else. I think the DNC wants Newsom, but he's as much of a liability to the DNC as anybody else. I think.
Have you considered what might happen if they don't actually, if Trump ends up getting arrested or convicted before the election? I mean, some of these cases they've got against him are pretty crazy.
Yeah.
I mean, I just don't know how that'll go. What's your thoughts on that?
Well, it would be crazy if the president was operating from a jail cell.
He pardons himself. I pardon myself. I'm the best president ever.
And that's not completely outside the realm of possibility. Looking at the last election though, at this stage in time, nobody thought, at least none of the big media thought, and certainly none of the polls would suggest that Trump was going to end up as the nominee. Every debate, all well, especially before the debates got started, it's like he was a joke. It's like what the hell's going on here? And then he just started to pick up steam. And once the primaries began and people began to let loose their thoughts, by voting, it became apparent that he was going to be the nominee. Well, here it's almost very similar. Like he's absolutely the presumptive nominee by all accounts and by all polls, but until people actually start voting, like there's no telling who's going to start sweeping. Ultimately, I don't know. I'm just a tenth Amendment kind of guy when it comes to the federal government. Like,
Yeah,
stay out of my lane.
100%.
And unfortunately, there's not very many people, politician wise, who's like that.
I agree.
And
Yeah. What's that?
certainly none that are even pro 2A. Like, everybody wants to say, this state, this county, this politician, whatever, is pro 2A. Well, are they really? Like, because if there's any restriction of owning a firearm, well, then you're not really a 2A kind of guy.
Exactly. Yeah, I look at the 1968, gun bill, or whatever they want to call it, and then the 86 one as well, and both of those to me are just blatantly unconstitutional.
Yeah.
I don't see how any court could allow any of those to exist.
Right.
And take the oath to uphold the Constitution. Like, it just doesn't make a damn bit of sense to me. And the Gun Control Act as well, the 1934 Gun Control Act as well. I mean, they both just awful, or all three of them. I don't know. I guess we'll see how it all works out. I'm pretty concerned that they're getting the Muslim crowd fired up with the Palestinian and Israeli thing, and I could see a situation where you have BLM and Antifa, as well as a whole lot of Muslim folks raising chaos because of what's going on overseas, and because of elections, and because of whatever. And I think we're looking at some pretty serious unrest in urban and semi-suburban areas personally.
Yeah.
I've recommended people for years, like, you really should think about moving into a rural area. What are your thoughts on city living versus suburban and rural and everything?
Well, I lived in Compton, Washington. I'm sorry, Tacoma,
Yeah.
but it may as well be like Compton. And I've lived in, by virtue of being in the military, having to live in urban environments. But I didn't grow up that way. I grew up in the deserts of West Texas and mountains of New Mexico. And it was used to a different way of growing up. Every urban environment has a lot of the same hazards. West Coast is atrocious at it. If you live west of I-5, if even just a natural disaster were to strike, whether could be a tsunami, could be another hurricane, or not hurricane, but volcano or something that just Mount Rainier blew its top. There's no way to evacuate. Like, it's physically impossible to evacuate if you live west of the I-5.
Sure.
But every other urban center is the same way. If you're stuck down in Atlanta and something happens, you're stuck where you're at. Saying, if you live in New York City, you're stuck where you're at. You're just not going to be able to get out. The gridlock is going to be atrocious.
Yeah. So
living in a more rural environment, there's dangers and hazards that you accept with that as well. Like, if I called 911, it would take 45 minutes for an ambulance to show up at my house. Like, there's trade-offs that you give. But if you're driving down the road at night, like, don't pass a gas station at night, because if it's open, because the odds are the next one's going to be closed. Like, everything shuts down at night. So whether you're out west, in the Mountain West, or even out here, in the rural part of Georgia, like, things just shut down at night. But one of the easiest ways to find a place to live is if you look at a dark sky map, or a night map of the light pollution of the United States, and look at areas where it is extremely bright, and look at the areas where it's dark. the darker the sky, the less populated the area. Um, and it's certainly a place to look for.
Yeah.
Because I think you're going to find people that you just resonate with more, um, and people who share your ideals and your values. And again, you're not going to find that's one of the trade-offs getting out. Like if I stayed on the West Coast or if I moved to a big city, uh, with the experience and the training and the certifications I had in the military, I could have walked into an easy $150,000 job somewhere.
Sure.
I'm not going to find that here unless I'm working remotely, which has its own pros and cons. But I'm not going to find that kind of job where I can physically go do that here. It just doesn't exist. But I'm okay with that. Like I don't need that stress in my life, and I don't need what that money has to offer. So there's a lot of pros and cons, but you just got to figure out what is the best way to live the things that I believe. Because
Right.
no matter what we're doing, that's exactly what we're doing. We are living what we believe, whether we're lying to ourselves or whether we're being honest with ourselves, and find the place to do that. Find the community to do that in. And for me, it's not in the city. It's a little bit more of a rural environment.
I'm the same way here. I'm up in just outside of Concord, New Hampshire, probably about 25 minutes or so outside that. And New Hampshire was just voted the freest state in America, believe it or not. Now I don't really fully buy that because I pay about $10,000 in property taxes every month. Or 10,000 a year, excuse me.
Yeah.
It's hard to imagine that they're the freest in the country, but with the tax rates we have here. But I do really enjoy the people up here. It's good. I'm an hour and a half commute to get down to Hanscom where I work, and but it's really nice being surrounded by like-minded people. You know what I mean? Like just being around folks that have the same values and all that kind of stuff is it's worth it to pay a little bit more and to get out, into more rural areas. And so for those people who are still resistant and still thinking that you can't do it and all that kind of stuff, I would just tell you that you will never ever regret it. It's way better being in a rural area. So all right, so we're getting fairly close. If you guys have any questions that you would like to ask Stoker, then throw them in the chat and we will try to get to them. I've got some lightning round questions here.
All right.
Yeah, they're just just kind of this or that kind of questions. If you had to pick one, what would you go with? Don't read too deep into them. So number one, 9mm or 45?
45.
Glock or Smith & Wesson?
Smith & Wesson.
Ford, Chevy, or Dodge?
Depends on the year, but Dodge.
Okay. Internal or external frame? Pack.
Oh, external.
All right. Old school leather, all leather, or new school hybrid style boots?
Leather.
All right. Wool socks or cotton?
Wool.
AR-15 or AR-10?
AR-15 shooting 300 blackout.
All right. For home defense, going with an AR, a pistol, or a shotgun?
Shotgun.
And fixed blade or folding knife?
Oh, fixed blade.
And for starting fire, matches, lighter, or ferro rod?
Lighter.
All right, that's it. I rounded it up. Or I rounded it out. That was all those. Let's see here. Where's the best place for people to follow you on social media? We got YouTube, the YouTube channel, which I threw in the link in the chat here. We've got the website, stokermatic.com, right?
Yep.
Are you on Instagram or any of the other social medias?
Yeah, I mean, I'm on Instagram. It's Stoker Craft.
Okay.
And then, Facebook. And I have a Twitter account, but Twitter's just too crazy. Like I can't do. I can't get on there. It's just too overloading.
Makes your head want to explode.
Yeah. I'm on Telegram, and even that is almost too much. But yeah, YouTube is definitely the best place, and it's a good thing. Like I don't have a huge channel, but the the benefit to that is I still have the opportunity to respond almost to every comment. Almost to every comment I can leave some kind of a response to. It's getting to the point where it's hard to keep up with now, but
I was gonna say it's growing pretty fast, isn't it? I
oh
mean,
yeah,
you seem to be doing pretty well. I mean, you got what, 40 or 50,000 subscribers already, or is it
65 maybe.
65? Yeah, yeah. I mean, it's growing quick because I think last
Yeah,
time I thought it was 50. So that's good. You're doing really good stuff over there. And where do people go to get the SHTF field manual?
Amazon, that for sure.
That's the best spot to get it. Okay, very cool. Very cool. Well, hey, thank you for coming on today. I really appreciate it. I enjoy speaking with you, and I tell people you got to subscribe to his channel. He's got a lot of really good information over there, and if you start watching it, it'll be like 3 o'clock in the morning and be like, oh crap, I got to get up and go to work tomorrow, because he's got a lot of really good stuff over there. So thank you so much for coming on, man. I
appreciate the opportunity to talk a little story with you. It's been awesome.
All right, man.